In the meantime, I'm joined by a former Labor leader, Mark Latham, and now One Nation leader in the New South Wales Parliament. Mark, thank you so much for joining me for some straight talk. Now, we'll get on to Albo in a second, but I'll really have to ask you first about Margaret Court, the great Australian tennis champion, is now leader of her church in Western Australia, a church that feeds thousands of poor families. It's wonderful what she does, gives away 30 tonnes of food a week. But since this virus hit, she's gone from handing out 30 tonnes a week of food to 70, more than double. So she needed help. Tell us what happened next.
Well, they approached the LOTTERYWEST, a government agency in WA that run the lotteries there and hand out money for charitable causes in the community. And they wanted to get an extra freezer van because they run off their feet, that high level of unemployment and growing poverty in Western Australia. And this LOTTERYWEST outfit told them at a meeting, it's been reported by Margaret Court's Victory Life Community Services, they said, "We do not discriminate. We sponsor the LGBT parade, but not this church charity outlet." And it was also said at the meeting that this was because of the biblical views on same-sex marriage. Now, LOTTERYWEST may have a different interpretation of what was said, and we'd be happy to hear that. But if it's true that they are putting views about same-sex marriage and LGBT ahead of poverty-stricken, needy people needing these food parcels in Perth, well, that's a case of religious discrimination and ethically quite a disgrace. It's very disturbing that a government agency would put political and religious views ahead of the actual needs of people. Now, I visited the Victory Life compound facilities there in Perth, and I've got to say I've rarely, in a fairly decent public life, seen anything as impressive, Andrew. It's like a government agency in its own right, with counselling services, food, parcels, all sorts of support for needy people. And if it's spurred on by the religious beliefs of Margaret Court, I think that's a bloody wonderful thing. I think that's great that people go out of their way to help other citizens. What's wrong with that? And if they could be supported by the new freezer van, that would do other good. So it's appalling. LOTTERYWEST may have a different interpretation, but at this stage, if they don't, they stand condemned.
Yeah, but this is the whole thing I've always got about the criticism of Margaret Court, right? Smashed, vilified, ostracised, calls for her name to be taken off one of the stadiums here in Melbourne because of an opinion on same-sex marriage, when I would guarantee that 99.99% of her critics, so upset about what she might think, do not actually do the kind of help that she does every single week. And I find this, if true, this bigotry, that her views trump helping her feed poor people, that stinks. And it shows to me that this really is a society where people are judged by how they seem rather than what they actually do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a tyranny against someone who's gone out of her way to help needy people. I'm not a religious believer myself, but I'm passionately committed to eradicating poverty and helping the needy in society. And whatever motivates people within the parameters of the law, I think it's a great thing. Look, it's a super impressive service that Margaret Court and her other staff and volunteers run in Perth. She's a great Australian as a sportswoman, the greatest female tennis player ever. But I think she's an even greater Australian for the help for the needy. And to hear that LOTTERYWEST wouldn't provide extra assistance in this crisis, this economic and poverty crisis, it really is very disturbing.
Oh, unbelievable.
I'm pleased to say in New South Wales I've got a religious anti-discrimination bill that would stop this sort of thing happening, because I would fear it would creep into other government programs and agencies, even here in New South Wales. So we need to be vigilant in stamping out any form of discrimination, particularly this form of religious discrimination, which is very insidious.
Well, like you, I'm not a Christian, but with Christianity, if it inspires people to do good, like they say, I think it's in the Bible, by their fruits you will know them. And if it inspires people to do this kind of charity, that is a religion I think we should support. Mark, I was struck by the way SBS, taxpayer-funded multicultural broadcaster, described the 4 ways which it claimed the virus is making Australia worse. This is part of its news bulletin yesterday. Note the last factor.
But first, a look at how this pandemic could leave Australia smaller, poorer, older and whiter.
Poorer and whiter. I'm not sure which is the more shocking of those two things, or the four things he named. How could this leave us whiter, Mark?
Well, I think for SBS, being whiter is the great sin here, the thing they're most worried about. But how would they know? It's certainly not news. This is just an opinion, unsupported by any evidence. Is there some sort of white barometer we have in Australia, measuring skin colour with a daily update? The report went on to say there's a large number of people leaving Australia in these circumstances. Not as many will come in. Look, I think no matter your skin colour, it's welcome to have a break from big incoming immigration. A lot of our suburbs and ethnic communities in particular suffer this, crowded into areas without adequate services. We need a break from big Australia population growth. I think that's a good thing. And if genuine environmentalists had any sense, they'd be supporting it too. So this is just typical of the latest fad where everyone's obsessed by skin colour. Everyone in the media elite's obsessed by skin colour, particularly at SBS, when really average Australians just want a better life, better education, healthcare for their kids, and talk of whether we're a more or less whiter country. They say that white Australia was bad. Well, what about white commentary? It's pretty crook too.
I'm just amazed that SBS wraps it up into being poorer and smaller and whiter. Like they're all terrible. The horsemen of the apocalypse. Hey, another biblical reference. Mark, Labor leader Anthony Albanese in a few minutes is going to do what you did as opposition leader, budget reply speech. He's going to make a big pitch to women. He says, the budget ignored them and they've been the hardest hit and blah, blah. He's going to announce a $6 billion plan for even more childcare. Your response to this, it's a pitch to identity politics.
Well, it is, but also adding to the debt. You mentioned my budget reply. I was up against John Howard, who had surplus budgets and they paid off all the debt. Now Albanese's got to pick over the ruins of $1.1 trillion in debt through the forward estimates, but he's adding to it with this childcare plan. And again, where's the evidence, Andrew? Where's the evidence that women are the worst affected part of the community in this recession? In fact, if you look at the data, there are major female-dominated employment sectors that have got absolute job security. The people who won't lose their job in this environment are public servants, state and federal,
correct,
around the country. And you can do the Ruby Princess in New South Wales, you won't lose your job as a public servant. You can stuff up terribly in Victoria with hotel quarantine. No one is sat in any part of the Australian public sector. It's 65% female in New South Wales, and I expect in other states. So there's job security. Also, other female-dominated sectors, lawyers, GP, doctors, vets, office managers. There's a hell of a lot of employment security out there for women, but I don't see the point in the divisiveness of identity politics. Albanese is saying this without evidence, but it also sends a message to men that they're left out. If you're a battling man out there, you're trying to run an enterprise, a tourism or hospitality show that's been locked down, where's the rhetoric and care for you? Why split the employment market between men versus women artificially and give men the impression that Labor doesn't care about them? This was a party founded by working men where today they've got a leader who goes out of his way not to talk about the needs of working men.
Well, as SBS would say, there's one thing wrong with this country. It's whites, and as Labor would add, and men. But there you go. There we are, Mark. We're an endangered species. Thank you so much for at least joining on this show while it's still allowed.
Okay. We're hanging in there, Andrew. Thank you.
We're hanging in there. Thank you, Mark.